Welcome to episode 17. In this episode, we're going to talk about retrieval augmented generation, commonly known as RAG. RAG is the technology behind a lot of really interesting applications, from LLM-based chatbots to AI search features. So what is it? Here is an entire architecture diagram of retrieval augmented generation, and we will go through each of these steps individually because I know it looks really complex here. First up is our vector database. So our vector database takes unstructured data. So this could be text, it could be images, it could be audio files, and it's going to embed these using one of our embedding models. It's going to transform the data into a vector embedding. So it's going to transform it into a series of numbers that represents that information. So our unstructured data in this example is the SKU, the description, and the image. And so we're going to have a vector that represents that particular SKU, description, and image. And this vector is generated by our embedding model. Remember that an embedding model is what we use to map words to a vector representing semantic meaning, just like we talked about in a couple of the previous episodes. All right, next we have our user query, and our user is going to enter some question, let's say, into this chatbot, or they're going to enter some query into our AI search, and we're going to use that same embedding model to transform our user query into a vector embedding. So, and again, into a series of numbers that represents that user query. So if my user asks for black leather boots, then I'm going to have a vector series of numbers that represents black leather boots. All right, so now I have my vector database, and now I have my user query, and I have vectors that represent everything in my database, and I have a vector that represents my user query. So these are all numbers, so now I can do math. So now I can use a similarity algorithm to find closest matches to the user query in the vector database. There are many different ways to calculate this. Most commonly used is cosine similarity, which just finds the angle between two of these vectors. So it's trying to find the most similar vector. So in this particular example, when I said black leather boots, perhaps the three boots that come up as my three closest matches look like this. What does this look like when we think about the semantic space and embedding space? So remember, our vector is really large, probably like 500-ish to 1,000 words long, but we're going to compress it down into 2 dimensions so we can actually visualize it here. And so we have the concept of black leather boots. And so this is a word concept, and it's going to look like all of these black leather boots are going to be surrounding that user query, right? So our user query is going to be right here. And so the closest similar boots are going to be here, and those are what are going to be returned by our similarity algorithm. Now, close to black leather boots are also brown boots. Farther away are going to be high heels, and then farther away than that are going to be hats, although the cowboy hat is a little closer because we have a cowboy boot here. And so this is what it might look like in semantic space. Okay, so we have all of these different components, right? So we've talked about this. We have the user query, an embedding model that transforms the user query into vector embeddings. That black leather boots is now a number. And then we use a similarity algorithm to find the closest matches between items in our database, which we've already embedded, and our user query. We get these 3 black boot options returned, and then these closest matches are just fed as part of a prompt to a large language model. And so if you need a review on prompting, go back to the previous episode. So they're going to be fed in as part of the prompt, and then the LLM is going to generate a response to the user's query, and this response is going to be sent back to the user. You can leverage vector database just for search capabilities. So if you're using an AI search platform, you're going to find those similar items, and you're just not going to pass it to an LLM at all. So no large language model in the loop. You're just going to pass those items directly back to the user, or maybe provide a page that has them ranked by similarity. So what does retrieval augmented generation give us? Well, it gives us more transparency. Instead of unknown training data that the model is sourcing information from, we ground it in specific facts that we feed as part of the model. And we don't have to explicitly say what those facts are because we're using a similarity algorithm to find what are the closest facts or products to a particular question or query. So retrieval augmented generation makes large language model systems, AI systems, more transparent. Thank you for joining me for this episode in the AI for People Who Hate Math series. This is an unscripted series that is inspired by my conversations with people who feel like they can't conceptually understand AI because it's just too much math. And it usually is. Most AI classes, tutorials, and videos are full of math. The AI classes that I teach as a professor have math on nearly every slide. I wanted to challenge this assumption that AI could only be conceptualized by people with strong math backgrounds. Especially as AI permeates our daily lives, I think it's important that everyone understands the technology, at least conceptually, because without it, we're putting a lot of trust into systems we don't understand. Feel free to let me know in the comments if there are topics that you want to see covered. The initial launch is 20 episodes, and I am excited to see what you think.